and welcome to A Healthy Mind. I'm Dr. Cislina Grosser-Ledbetter, Director of Counseling and Student Development at the University of the District of Columbia, and your host. On today's edition, our issue is learning disabilities. Joining me to discuss a broad range of issues surrounding learning disabilities is Dr. Neely-Walters. Dr. Neely-Walters has earned a doctorate degree in clinical psychology from Argosy University. Her diverse experience includes working on Capitol Hill as a legislative assistant on the Education and Workforce Committee, assisting with rehabilitation efforts for incarcerated juveniles, serving as a volunteer at the Children's National Medical Center, working with teen mothers enrolled in the Prince George's County Partners for Parent program, and helping children and families receiving social services. Currently, she serves as a psychologist for a charter school in the District of Columbia. Dr. Neely-Walters is also the co-founder of Sisters Achieving Success, Individuality, and Excellence, and Metropolitan Psychological Group, LLC. She has a passion for helping children and families enhance their ability to live healthy, purpose-driven lives. Her motto, individuals do not make systems, but systems make individuals. Welcome, Dr. Neely.
Thank you.
So talk about that motto, individuals do not make systems, but systems make individuals.
Thank you. Well, definitely that's been my motto probably now for the last 5 to 10 years. Oftentimes when I'm approached and people want me to do therapy with their child, or teachers refer children to me, they say, fix this person. And I strongly believe that there's no way that you can work with any child without working with the system that the child is within.
Right. So what is that? So does that mean that you prefer to do group or family? How do you work on the system? And I think that's sort of the lifelong challenge in child therapy, is working with children and knowing that no matter how hard you work with them, when you let them go, they're going back into that environment.
Absolutely, and that's why I truly believe in a multisystemic approach. So working with the family, if the family is involved with outside agencies, working with and collaborating with the outside agencies, in addition to doing individual therapy with the child, because you're absolutely right. You can work with a child, you can have 16 sessions, 1 hour weekly, but once you send the child back into their environment, if the environment is still the same, it's going to be pretty difficult for that particular child.
And I suppose that when you're doing that, if you don't have systemic buy-in, if everybody's not on board with the child, and sometimes it could be the parents not available or on board, or the school system not working with you or available or on board, then there are kind of different sets of tools that you're working with the child.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're focusing mostly on learning disabilities, right? And it's so important because it seems like everybody knows somebody with a child with a learning disability. And, I don't remember whether that was the case growing up, but it just seems like so many of our kids these days are being diagnosed with learning disabilities. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that is? What's happening with learning disabilities? Are we just getting better at catching them, or is there something else going on?
So just in terms of the research, 8 to 10% of children under the age of 18 in America are said to have a learning disability. So learning disabilities are simply disorders that affect one's ability to make math calculations, possibly read or write. However, the key to that is that learning disabilities do not define how smart you are. So learning disabilities do not reflect your intelligence. So if you are a student with a learning disability, it just means that, for example, if you're having difficulty with math calculations, it doesn't mean you don't know math or you can't do math. It just simply means you may be having difficulty in that particular area. So maybe the math needs to be presented to you in a different way. So again, we all have different learning styles.
Right.
And so not every difficulty with learning is classified or can be classified as a learning disability.
So let me ask you this. So you just said that sometimes it's about learning style.
Yes.
The traditional teaching and the traditional way parents too, but classroom teachers communicate with the mass of students is usually whatever way they were trained.
Yes.
Right? So if that teacher is not tailoring, which I know is impossible, and I know that teachers have a really hard job, we love our teachers, but if that teacher is not able to parse out which students need this type of learning style and which students need that, can that then increase her or his perception that that child is struggling with a learning disability? Or is it really a learning disability if they can't kind of get the basic lecture style learning?
Absolutely. It definitely can affect it. Typically, for example, on a day-to-day basis, I do classroom observations. And I've seen the classroom, the ideal classroom, where you have different learning stations and the students are being offered many different ways to sort of grasp the information. However, I've also seen the not so ideal classroom where it's the class is 90 minutes long, and the teacher has almost been trained in a sense in a professor style, if you will. And so I work with middle school students. And so for middle school students, for someone to stand in front of them and lecture like how a professor would do in a college program, that doesn't typically work.
How long should the lecture be in a middle school?
So typically, anything that's past, if you're doing whole group, meaning standing in front of the students and lecturing, and you've gone past 30 minutes, I can almost guarantee you that you've lost a lot of students in the class.
30 minutes.
Yes, 30 minutes. And so again, if you're just standing there lecturing and you're not really engaging the students, you're not having students to peer partner, you're not having students come up to the board, you're not having students to maybe stand up and recite different things. If you've gone past 30 minutes and you're just standing in front of the students doing whole group, you've lost. If it's 20 kids in the room, I've guaranteed you that you've already lost like 5 or 6.
And so the idea is that in classroom settings, you have to be interactive and engaging.
Absolutely.
To make sure that you catch everybody. So you see the classrooms where the teachers have different styles, and you said the ideal classroom is the classroom where there are different groups.
Yes.
Do you see that in the same school? So the traditional style in one school and the mixed method style in another school?
Absolutely.
In the same school?
Yes. Particularly what I see is first year teachers are typically under a lot more stress than your more seasoned teacher. And so first year teachers, typically their idea of teaching is I have to get this information out.
I see.
And so
and they teach them to the test.
Yes, absolutely. And
they want their jobs.
Yes, they do. And so oftentimes their lesson plan, I always say to the teachers, you've written this 9-week lesson plan, but if you don't know your audience and you haven't captured your audience, then really who is the 9-week plan written for?
Wow.
Because it's not going to work if your audience is not engaged. And so that's sort of one of my biggest pet peeves is that new or first year teachers, I think, need a lot more training on engaging the class opposed to doing the whole group style where they're just standing and sort of lecturing and not really focused on who's grasping the information.
And so when we think about learning disabilities, we often think the poor kids have the learning disabilities or the bad kids have the learning disability. If they're acting up, they got a learning disability. That's the first thing that they're going to do. So that's what we think. Is there some truth in that?
No. Actually, what comes to mind for me is the Ben Carson story.
Okay, what's that?
So Ben Carson, one of our most renowned surgeons in the United States, single mom. Mom has a 3rd grade education.
From Baltimore.
Ben Carson, troubled youth, got into a lot of trouble, wasn't really focused academically in school, thus his academic performance was low, and they were trying to label him as a child with a learning disability. Mom worked with him, and here we are, as history would see it, he's one of the biggest surgeons that we have. So I really, that sort of falls into along the lines of cultural competency. So because you are from a low socioeconomic background, or because your parents may only have a 5th grade education, or because you have gotten into some trouble, doesn't mean you have a learning disability.
Right, and so it also kind of feeds into what I think about is stereotype.
Absolutely.
So you talked about, what, I don't know, 5 to 10 or 8 to 10% of
Yes.
all, ages 12 and under?
Students 18 and
18
under.
and under are going to be diagnosed with a learning disability. Does that vary by socioeconomic status? I mean, are poor kids or are rich kids more likely to be, maybe diagnosed isn't even the right question, because they may be more likely to be diagnosed because of all the stereotyping that happens. But is there any data that shows that they're more likely to have a learning disability?
Typically what you see is African American males in particular are typically targeted. So if they have a behavioral problem, then lots of people automatically assume, oh, they must not be able to read, or he's probably going to have difficulty with the math, or he's probably not going to know his science. And so oftentimes African American males, particularly early in childhood, so elementary and middle school, are often diagnosed with ADHD, and then all of a sudden, because he's been given a diagnosis of ADHD, you'll see parents or people pushing parents or trying to coerce parents into having their child receive an individual education plan, an IEP.
So how do you deal with that? I mean, you're in the school system, you see it every day, you're talking about it, so that means it still exists, it's not over. So how do you deal with that? I mean, I'm thinking about how do you deal with it? You have a child who has a learning disability. You're an advocate in many ways. You're a school psychologist.
Yes.
And how does the parent deal with this, black child who that is struggling with maybe some behavioral issues, but is brilliant and is not having issues learning, but having some other things? How do you deal with the stereotype and the stereotype threat that ensues as a result of all of that profiling that goes on in the classroom?
Typically, again, it requires for all the stakeholders to come to the table, so meaning the teachers, the parent, and then also a very good idea is to actually have the student in the meeting so that the student is absolutely.
Really? And hearing everything?
Yes,
Wow.
so that the student understands that because of your behavior or because of you not doing your homework, this is sort of what people are thinking. And so what are your needs? How can we better support you so that we can come up with several different interventions so that we can kind of keep you back on track? And so basically a lot of data gathering.
I see.
And so before someone is actually given a classification of having a learning disability, ensuring that all the stakeholders at the table, including the parent and the student, ensuring that we have enough data.
So when does a learning disability typically show up? So I know you're middle school,
Yes.
right? And oftentimes by the time it gets to you, it's already identified, maybe, I don't know. But when does it usually show up?
Typically, that's an early childhood
early?
disorder. So you're talking, sometimes people will even try to diagnose a 3 or a 4-year-old with having a learning disability, which is so unfortunate to me because, again, a learning disability or sometimes having difficulty with learning doesn't always mean you should be classified with a learning disability. You could just simply have some delays in development. So some people mature faster than others. And so usually students, as you stated, by the time I see them, they've already been diagnosed. So you're looking at elementary school, where a child is still growing and we're not even giving that person the opportunity to sort of develop. We're already trying to, in a sense, label them
Right.
before they've even had a chance to even yes
to write their first sentence.
Exactly.
To put together their first algebraic expression.
Yes.
But so you said 3 or 4, so I'm thinking even earlier. When you see delays like that, 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, sometimes don't they mean that the exact opposite is happening? That the learning disability is in fact not there, but this kid is getting ready to blow us out of the water with his genius or her genius. So we talk a little bit about the relationship between learning disabilities and perceived intelligence or IQ, and if there's a relationship at all.
Absolutely, very good question. And so oftentimes, students are, again, not given the opportunity, as you say, to blow us out of the water
Right.
if they're having behavioral problems. And so really teaching the child, different social skills, really tapping into their intelligence by way of different
Really
behavioral
early.
methods. Yes, absolutely.
Really early. So we
Yes.
don't have to wait to see, because I've read stories where a child has, we typically expect for our children to walk somewhere between, 9 and 12 months. And if they don't hit those benchmarks, red flag, that kid must have a learning disability. But sometimes they don't walk for 12 months, but then all of a sudden they decide, okay, well, I'm going to get up and start running, and then they go to the piano and they play a concerto by Bach. I know that's something different,
Yes.
but the point is that if we get into early and label, and I think that's what your point was,
Yes.
we have to be mindful about getting into early and labeling them.
This brings up a student throughout my work history that I will never forget. This particular student, poor academics, coming from an urban city neighborhood. A lot of people think that this student has already been labeled as bad.
How old is this student?
This student is now probably about 14 or 15.
But at the time you're talking,
Yes.
was about what age?
But at the time, probably about 9 or 10.
Okay.
But this student, again, poor grades, poor behavior, walking out of class, cursing teachers out.
Not good.
Absolutely not good. But placing at a very high place in the citywide spelling bee. And so again, people were wondering, how is this happening? This is a student who doesn't do any homework, behaviorally inappropriate interpersonal skills, but yet placing very high in the citywide spelling bee.
So how do you as a parent deal with that? Or an administrator deal with that? You've got this brilliant kid, but they've got these behavioral problems. I'm thinking there's an intervention
Yes.
that needs to be scheduled, but how do you deal with that? Because the reality is class needs to continue, right?
Yes.
You need to have class because the other kids need to learn too.
Yes.
How do you deal with that? You've got this kid with a learning disability, but they've got all these behavior issues.
The wonderful thing that I'm able to do is to actually individualize and tailor
that's great.
a student's day. And so if this is a student where every 15 to 20 minutes they need to be motivated, it could be receiving some sort of tangible incentive. It could be something as simple as, taking them to the school gym every 20 to 30 minutes. So what really the idea or the intervention is to actually find out what motivates the
And
student.
does that help? Does that interrupt their learning process? Or?
No, it absolutely does not. I think that one thing that the school system needs to learn how to do, going back to what we originally talked about, is being more flexible, not having just one way of someone learning. I've seen students where they need to sit on the floor opposed to sitting at a desk, or they're more comfortable in a bean bag versus the traditional desk chair. And so allowing them to sit in the bean bag and continue to write their notes as the teacher is talking, what's wrong with that?
Is it realistic?
It
For public schools?
It absolutely is, yes.
Okay. And have you seen a model where that works?
Actually, where I currently work,
Which is where? Give them a shout out.
Paul Public Charter School.
All right, give them a shout out. Nothing wrong with
Actually, that is one of our best practices.
Oh, really?
Our motto is sort of whatever works. And so
like
we
that.
do whatever works, and we're able to individualize every student's educational plan.
That's fantastic. So that when my kid wants to have, what do you call those, Dr. Dre things blasting?
Yes.
And doing his homework?
Absolutely, that's not a problem.
Oh, I need prayer. All right. So what are some of the other conditions that you see kind of crop up with other psychological issues that crop up with learning disabilities?
So typically, learning disabilities are usually very comorbid with, again, as I mentioned before, ADHD, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant
Why?
disorder.
Do you know why?
Well, typically what happens is if you're in a classroom, when students are in a classroom and they're not engaged, they will find something else to do. So if that's throwing a piece of paper, constantly dropping their pen on the floor.
Spitballs.
Yes, yes, tapping on the desk, constantly raising their hand, or just simply getting out of their seat, sharpening their pencil. They will find other things to do. And so usually when a teacher cannot, what they call control a student, or if everyone is not sitting down neatly with their hands, placed on the desk or in their lap, usually then teachers will say, oh, this child must be oppositional defiant, or this child must have a conduct disorder, or this child must have some sort of attention problem. And so oftentimes it seems like it's very difficult for whoever is facilitating the classroom to really take a look at themselves.
Yeah, and you have to be so engaged in the process.
Yes.
Right? And committed to wanting to make a difference.
Absolutely.
That you see all of these kids
Yes.
as individuals.
Yes.
Right? So how do you get through that, navigate that system if you're a teacher and you see this kid? What is the first step that they should take to prevent the stereotyping that we talk about? What is the first thing that in your best practice mind,
right.
what is it that you would recommend for these teachers to do first? And label is not it, I'm guessing. Okay, so what is it?
So for me, I know that typically we come to school. So school starts at about like August the 28th. We have a 2-week period where the staff comes back before the students come back. And so what I really encourage all teachers to do is you have your roster, take a look at your audience, look at the files, look at the students that are being enrolled. In addition to that, my principal is very good about professionally developing us before the students come. And so oftentimes that professional development, that 2-week period before the students come back, is we do a lot of workshops around the students we serve and some of the things that you will see with the students we serve and how to best handle that. So we do vignettes where the teachers are actually given, cases, and we have to sit there and we all have to figure out in a team planning meeting.
Wow,
we have to develop an action plan of how you're going to handle this.
That's great. And have you found, how long have you been working that intensely? With this, it sounds like, and I really, I'm sold out for training. I really believe in professional development and training. How long have you guys been doing this model of training to make sure that teachers are equipped to deal with what they're going to face in August?
So I've been there since 2005, and every year that I've been there, that is one of the things that we do.
And what kind of gender differences do you see? Do you see a difference between boys versus girls? First of all, I guess, is there a difference in terms of the data? Do you know whether guys are more likely than girls?
Absolutely. Boys, again, particularly minority boys, are usually diagnosed a lot earlier and sooner than girls. Typically with girls, a lot of people will sit down and they'll talk to a girl about her academic performance. Absolutely. So with boys, it's they're bad, they're not able to learn this, and they kind of get canceled out or sort of, thrown away. But girls, people take more time with girls.
Yeah, because girls are cute,
yes.
Right? So I guess the idea is that if you are a parent, and thankfully all of the parents in your school have you. But if you're a parent and you are really, really committed to making sure that your child, as all parents are, I am sure, gets what they need, and you know that there have been challenges, what do you do? Do you, from the very beginning, go to the principal or the team, or do you wait to see what happens so that if you're kind of having these perceptions in your head that it's something going on and it's really not? How do you recommend that parents deal with their thoughts about their child having a learning disability?
That's an excellent question. I'm glad you asked that. Most of our parents, I will say, we have a very good support system. And so I would encourage all parents to develop a support system within your child's school. So from day one, going to the orientation, not just dropping them off, but coming in and asking, what what type of teachers are there. So, you have your highly qualified teachers, then you have paraprofessionals that are also in the classroom. So really getting to know the staff. In addition to that, I would also suggest that parents actually have a support system outside of the school, so asking questions and researching.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's really realistic for the outside piece. And sometimes parents are struggling just trying to get through the day-to-day grind. And so how do what is your recommendation for those parents that really just struggle? And I'm going to give you, we've got about a minute and a half left, so I want you to give us some good knowledge and best practices about that.
Okay, I would definitely say, again, that just keeping in mind you are the voice for your child. And so you have to have your child's best interest. And so you are your child's biggest fan. And so really, again, collaborating with the school, even if that's one phone call a month or
and
one phone call a week.
Don't be afraid to be a pest.
Absolutely.
Right? Because
yes.
we can't piss you off. But don't be afraid to advocate.
Not at all.
Right, vehemently.
Yes.
Right, with the school, if your child has been diagnosed with a learning disability, because ultimately it's your child's life and it can set the course for the rest of your child's life.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank Dr. Neely-Walters for being my guest. If you would like more information about the topics we discussed on this program, you may contact Dr. Neely-Walters at Metropolitan Psychological Group, LLC, 4451 Parliament Place, Suite A, Lanham, Maryland, 20706. Or you may call 202-681-0966. I'm Dr. Cislina Grosser-Ledbetter. Thank you for watching.